Welcome to the podcast Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. In every episode, we interview business leaders who are navigating the complex world of B2B marketing. Whether you're trying to grow revenue, swoop into a new market, or launch new products, we promise you've landed in the right spot. And now your host, Richard Byrd.
Today, we have a very special guest. We have Patrick Corcoran. He is the Global Head of Marketing and External Communications for Hitachi Digital Services. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
All right. Well, we have a tradition on the show. The first question we ask our guests is, if your company were a bird, what kind of bird would Hitachi Digital Services be, Patrick?
Oh, that's easy. We're going to fly like an eagle. You know, eagles have the best and the longest vision. And when you think about the way that Hitachi globally goes to market, there's always a 3-year plan that defines what's important, where the investments are, from an IT and OT perspective. And an eagle also has precision. It doesn't try to boil the ocean when it goes after its prey, in this case, obviously customers, right? So it stays very focused on what we believe to be a strength of ours and a need of the client. And there is a bit of history, right, behind the eagle, in terms of its role in nature's ecosystem. So for me, it is definitely an eagle. That is the right bird for Hitachi Digital Services and Hitachi globally.
I like it. Well, as a proud American, I appreciate the eagle for sure. Great. Well, Hitachi obviously is a massive global brand. Everybody knows the Hitachi brand, but tell me a little bit about Hitachi Digital Services and what you guys are up to over there.
So Hitachi Digital Services is really the global systems integration arm of all of Hitachi. So Hitachi Global, most people are used to Hitachi in a B2C context, televisions, excavators, elevators, air conditionings, right? Depending upon where you live in the world, your touch points with Hitachi are very different. Now, you may have heard of Hitachi Energy, right? The largest provider for all the transformers that are being built, as an example. Hitachi Rail, all throughout Europe and the U.S., rolling stock, etc. So again, it depends on your touch point of Hitachi, and generally in marketing, right, the first touch point is the one that always sticks in your mind from a impact perspective. Now, for our perspective, Hitachi Digital Services, we've been around now as a brand of Hitachi Digital Services, not as sort of a company that all of a sudden just had X amount of people working all over the world. But we've been around as a formal brand for a little over 2 years. And Hitachi globally likes to ensure that all of its operating units are branded and positioned the right way for success. So historically, the IT business has been around now for 60 years, and obviously that goes through iterations. But we are the global SI, which means we're competing against all the well-known names, the Accentures, the Cognizants, the Wipros, Infosys, LTMs, DXCs, Hexawares, EPAMs, right? The tier ones, the tier twos, all the different companies that provide IT services across multiple industries and playing across different horizontals, whether it's enterprise apps, cloud and data, Internet of Things, that type of work. And so global organization. And, I've personally been a part of Hitachi now for 4.5 years. So I've seen a lot of shift and change to make sure that we're following the path of the eagle, if you will.
That's great. Yeah, that is, you have some worthy competitors you rattled off there.
Oh, yeah.
That presents a challenge from a marketing perspective for sure, huh?
100%. Whether it's, the question you always get as a marketer is, what do? Do you buy that ad at JFK when you walk through passport control, or do you spend money doing evergreen branding on LinkedIn? And, the answer is really, it depends. Right? Where are you in the market in your own brand maturity evolution? And what are you trying to achieve? And how do you get to the people that you think will have the most impact in terms of biz dev? So I think from our perspective, we like to be very focused on how we do that. And so you won't see large scale Hitachi Digital Services billboards and advertising, because context is important. And when you're competing against the larger B2C sort of nomenclature and historical references,
Mm-hmm.
you want to take advantage of your ability to be very, very specific using the digital world. So that's how we sort of think about that.
Yeah,
We have
that
a great
is.
brand, but we
Yeah.
just have an enterprise awareness group that we will target and continue to go after for the business that we need.
Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day work that you and your marketing team are doing. How big's your team? Where are you guys? I assume you're spread out all over the globe.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate enough to be in this role for now 6 or 7 months, and I've inherited an absolutely outstanding team that is truly global, from Vietnam to India to EMEA to North America, and a group of what I like to describe as elite on-site FTEs. You know, when you have to use technical language, that works together as the sun rises and the sun sets on all the various objectives we have, either they be regionally or globally. And some of the colleagues here have been here longer than me, 6, 7, 8+ years, and some of them, I would say about a third of them, are probably in their first quarter on the new team with us. So
Wow.
we've been able to really build out a good stellar organization here, which is sort of benchmarked on two important areas: brand and revenue, right? You make it simple, you're able to stay focused, work the process, and that'll bring us to where we want to be as an organization. So we're on the phone round the clock. We have, on Teams round the clock, sometimes emailing, depending on who wants to send it and who wants to respond. And I try my best not to send that many emails, but sometimes we just got to be reactive around the world with it. But yeah, I mean, it's a truly global team and a really elite bunch of marketeers that we have here.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges of being a leader in a global organization, because so I didn't realize this, but when you send an email out to somebody, when you're the boss, people feel obligated to respond to it. And it might be 3:00 in the morning their time when you're sending it out, and it's perfect, business hours during your time. So I could see where that could cause some false alarms.
Yeah, it's you just have to get used to the rhythm, right? And you have to, my message to the team has always been, there will be times when you're needed, and you got to make the call at that point, whether it's a Saturday night or a Tuesday morning or a Thursday midday, depending on what the request is. How do I respond to that? So it's always important for us to have agility, built into our response times for that stuff, especially for internal stakeholders, meaning our clients on the business side, right? We want to make sure that if we get a request for a logo, or we need emergency editing on a video for a board presentation, or there's an event that just came around that we got invited to last minute, we need to be able to shuffle around and put the chips in the right place to make sure we execute on that. Because if we can't respond to agility, then the business can't respond to the client's agility requirements, and it becomes a domino effect, which we want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, I worked for an international company like that, and the thing you're always fighting against is that marketing oftentimes is seen as a cost center, and in our case, we actually were a cost center, and we weren't thought of. We were actually a cost center, and you really want to be responsive to your internal clients and all that, and it's the business we were in, it was an oil and gas services company. And so there's always emergencies, and, there's always stuff we're having to respond to. And so, yeah, you're never really off in that role. But it's exciting. And I think I love working for international companies because you met so many cool, people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate from so starting in this industry, 13+ years ago. Let me step back. This industry, really started in two sort of frameworks. You had Western heritage companies, and you had India heritage companies, and you had a smaller version of Asia heritage companies like NTT Data, Fujitsu, and obviously Hitachi. But the bulk of this was happening when India was really the prime location for service delivery. And that was the early change in how outsourcing started to happen in the mid 2000s and so on. Now, at the same time, you had companies like EDS and HPE and CSC and IBM. Some are still here, some are not. Xerox, et cetera, which were considered Western heritage because where they were based, right?
Right.
Which is primarily onshore, but also leveraging the offshore for cost and speed. And so most of the time when you thought about IT, you thought India was the key location. And certainly it was. I mean, it's a tremendous history there in terms of its impact on the IT OT ecosystem. But I had started at a company that was primarily based in Central and Eastern Europe. And so this was what was called nearshore, right? Not offshore, but nearshore. So I had the opportunity to start my entryway into this ecosystem, not by going to India and the Philippines and Mexico, some of the more common locations from the early days, but spending time in places like Ukraine, Romania, Poland, obviously, the whole DACH region and that part of the world. And then when I finally get to Hitachi, where India is a key piece of it, Vietnam is a huge component of it, Portugal is a huge component of our overall service delivery map, I felt like I was behind because I'm now for the first time visiting these countries. Although I had already been in delivery centers and innovation labs across Eastern, Central, and Eastern Europe, but now I was becoming a part of the historic locations, if you will, where this whole industry sort of was born from. So that's been really a pleasure to go around and meet people all around the world and spend time with my colleagues, not only in the team, but of course the larger company, whether we're doing analyst events or launches of some sort for new offices or hosting clients or just being there and doing internal planning. In fact, I'm on my way to India on tomorrow night for 2 events we have in Bangalore and Delhi. So I feel like I have completed about 90% of the circle when it comes to IT locations. But I haven't been everywhere yet, but it's a part of the job that everybody thinks knocks a lot out of you from travel. And that happens, right? But even if you had to commute to an office 5 days a week, you still feel that, that rigor and that breakup. But being able to meet everybody has been tremendous, and just understand the cultures and the history. And some people say they've been there for 20 years. I haven't even, I've been working for 20 years, and they've been in a company for that long. So it's been a really, really humbling experience.
Yeah, that face to face is just really no substitute for it when you're trying to learn the culture of a company and meet the people. And I don't know, I'm a little old school, so maybe it's just just me, but I really feel like there's no substitute for management by roaming the halls.
Yes, I totally agree. We talk about this all the time. There are mornings we wake up and 4 different countries are represented on a meeting to finish a project. And even interviewing candidates, right? Or doing one-on-ones with people. You can't go to lunch, you can't grab a coffee, and you lose that human connection. And there are days that I wonder if we went back like 50 years ago, where everybody worked in the same building on A Street,
Yeah.
and everyone was together 5 days a week, and you could whiteboard and do these certain. Now, I'm not saying everyone's remote, but a large part of our team is. And there are days that I say, I wonder, would our production level be better on some of these tasks if even once a week we all were in an office together? And that's why we're a big believer in, I would say quarterly meetings, meaning, we try to keep the regional teams together. Whether I'm going to India, we're bringing people to the UK, we're bringing people to Dallas. That helps because you get to have some exposure with everybody. But you always wonder, what would it be like 1975, all in the same office, 5 days a week, happy hour on Thursdays, dinner, client dinners on Tuesdays. I haven't experienced that. I've never really had that cubicle life where it's one floor is all you and everybody goes out. I've been remote or traveling since I've really been working, quote, full time. So I don't even know what that experience is like.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting because that's how I started out my career, was obviously going into the office and then and having that office culture and all those things. But there's more and more people like you. We were talking about this the other day. Some friends of mine that are leaders of businesses that, there are people who have been in the workplace for 5 years and never gone to an office.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them because the whole pandemic, right? And
Yep.
and that whole work from home movement, and we're seeing that a lot of people are slowly making people come back into the office, at least with some sort of hybrid situation. But for global teams like you guys have, that's impossible, right? I mean, it would be impossible to do that.
Yeah, especially because when you don't have offices every 30 miles like we used to, right? I mean, we all
Yeah.
know that. I mean, even irrespective of what COVID did, there's always been a consolidation effort of real estate, right? Because people are in traveling roles or they're on site at a client. And you start to ask yourself, do I actually need that building anymore? And so when you start to break those up, no matter where people live, their distance now increases from the office. So I live on Long Island, and if we had to go to Manhattan, which would be the next logical location for us to meet, I'm looking at minimum 90 minutes of commuting, and that's only because the Grand Central line recently opened. But if I had to go to Penn Station and come back to the east side, I mean, you could be looking at 2 hours. And then you start to say to yourself, 4 hours a day, 20 hours a week of commuting, is that really a good use of time when you're on this
Yeah.
24/7 sort of clock or 24/5, I should say, trying to be productive for your clients and for your business? And I just don't believe that. So,
Yeah.
and you also have to consider offshore resources. You're going to want them to work a little bit later in the day to make sure that there's a lot oversight. You don't want to have this sort of, he checks in. It's not like a hospital shift where the day shift comes in, the night shift comes in. You need to have a sort of band of when you need everybody to be together for this reason, because we aren't together in person, at least remotely. So I'm not a big fan of wasting time on commuting, right?
Yeah. That New York commute is brutal too. Oh my God. Just to go, 2 miles down the same street could take you an hour.
I know. If I leave early enough, I can get there in an hour. When I go into the city, I often drive because it's easier to make phone calls, and it's a little more. You're not dependent upon schedules with trains and everything. But to get in the tunnel and out of the tunnel sometimes takes as long as it does to go 15 miles between Queens and Suffolk County. So,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I'm sort of jealous of places like Dallas and Houston, where it's like, oh, well, how far is that? Well, everything's about 15 minutes away.
Yeah. Houston, we got a little worse traffic than Dallas, I think, in ours. I break everything into 30-minute or an hour long. That's the way I always break it apart, here. But it's a pretty big area, so you can really, you can go a lot of miles, unlike in New York area, right? It might be a 2-hour trip, but you only go 8 miles or whatever.
You can pick up a lot of ground out there. I hear you. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, so you mentioned a little bit about the early days, you were working, doing nearshoring and for European companies. Is that where it all started for you?
Yeah. Interesting how I got here. I was originally going to undergrad to become a teacher. And I went to basically a teaching unit, which is now a university, St. Joseph's out here in New York. It was primarily a teaching school. I had a job at home. I did not, it was a commuting school, so I didn't go away. I wanted to coach football in high school, and since I had just graduated, I stayed on with them. He brought me on as, I guess one would consider it, a graduate assistant. And I had gone through almost, I would say 3 years out of the 4 of getting ready to teach. And I started to get introduced to sort of global affairs and international relations. And this was, this is still during, this is 2003, 2004, 2005. So there was a lot happening in terms of international affairs post 9/11, and we all remember Iraq and Afghanistan and the different things that the Bush administration specifically was doing. And I was growing up and in a college world where you start to learn the full picture of everything that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to learn about different philosophical ways of thinking about things, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt like if I went into high school and I taught history the same way for 30 years, that I would be bored. And I felt like I was putting together debates, everything from, big issues to local issues. We were putting together panels, leveraging professors. I was trying to get beyond how to teach. And so I decided then, first, I graduated in 2008. We all know what happened in 2008. So all these public, jobs, everything fell apart. So I went to graduate school and I got a master's in international relations. So my thinking was still, I want to get into policy. I want to get into think tank world, research. How do I be an analyst? Like that type of stuff. And I had started my doctorate at Catholic University, and you just look at the end of that road and you say, is this worth it? Where am I going to be? And I think by then I sort of plateaued, saying, all right, I have a master's. I've got 2 years at Catholic. I understand global affairs. I should start being focused on looking at a job. So I got a role at the Public Affairs Council when I was in DC. The Public Affairs Council was set up by Eisenhower for basically one of the associations. Like every brand has an association, realtor association, automakers association, right? But this was focused on government relations professionals, the people that were essentially managing lobbying efforts for large organizations. And this firm was, we would do everything from how much are you spending on this, how many people do you have, how many events are you having, who are your target audience in terms of this congressman or that senator, whatever it might be. And I really, really enjoyed my role. And having not, I think I was fortunate that I had a bit of a research background. So that was what let Adam was his name, bring me on board. And I stayed there for about a year in this sort of research analyst role. And you wonder, you're still thinking, how does that get you to marketing, right? So you think about analyst, right? And that was on my mind. So every 3 months I was applying to jobs. I wanted to get back to New York, and I was going back and interviewing. And, at that point in your life, just having a consulting gig and a bunch of education, you'll take any job you can get. So I did a stunt with a mortgage broker for a while in Manhattan. And then I finally landed, I guess what you can call my first full-time gig at a company called the International Institute for Learning, which was essentially a project management, Lean Six Sigma, ITIL firm that sold that to chief learning officers and CIOs. I'm starting to kind of get into this IT world a little bit, and I got on as a senior client partner. In fact, I landed my biggest deal in an elevator because one of the makeup manufacturers, I'll let you assume you know who I'm talking about, was on the floor above us. And I hear them chatting about, oh, we need some more Lean Six Sigma training. Do you know anybody? And I'm like, whoa. So I sprinted down to my office, got a catalog, ran right back up. And I said, we met in the elevator, long story short. Now,
love the hustle.
Yeah. In that whole, the year that I spent there, about 2 months into that, and this was actually, I was commuting into New York for the first year. This was before remote work even meant anything, back in 2012. So I'm kind of, saying, all right, I have this global international background. It's somewhat relevant to this because I'm good at researching and presenting. So now I need to figure out, how do I leverage this in sales? And the head of marketing there said to me, you have a lot of ideas. Why don't you help us build up this practice for ITIL, ITIL, which is a framework for IT professionals, and do a podcast. So here I am. Wow, I've never done that before. So I interviewed this guy, Jeff Sensen, and unfortunately the podcast is down. I guess, when people changed, they were removing some of their content. And so I said, wow, I kind of like this stuff, kind of planning, how do I get this go-to-market thing going to sell this more? Now, at the end of the day, I was still the sales guy, but this was kind of a side job they had given me. So we go to a Gartner event. And again, I have no idea at that point who Gartner is, what they do, what's an industry analyst. I just know what an analyst background is. And we're out there and we're trying to sell, and people are saying, I need project management. You're collecting business cards, you're scanning badges, you're doing whatever you need to do. And so we felt pretty good in terms of our couple days on the show floor. And now we're at a hotel with one of my colleagues who I sat next to, who was unfortunately 2008 hurt him too. He was an investment banker, and but he was a great salesman.
Yeah.
So he came into this company. He's been there a couple of years before. So I was kind of looking up to him, right? He was a New York guy, a couple of years on me, and he was helping me shift this. So I got to go network. I can't just sit here and talk to you. We got to go find some more business. So I meet this individual at the bar, and we start chatting, and she's telling me about this company called Luxoft. Again, IT world. I'm still not there yet, right? I'm on the other side of it. But she's telling me that she's looking to hire someone to do analyst relations. And it just clicked. I said, that sounds like something I can do. I have this background in research. I've been applying to be an analyst from, through hedge funds all the way to think tanks. This sounds like something I might be good at. And having a sales background, if I need to talk to a lot of people, I could, fake it till I make it, right?
Yeah.
So she was in charge of investor relations at that time. Now the company had not gone public, but I needed to come up with a reason to speak to this woman once a month just to stay in touch, because I really want this job, right?
Yeah.
Now, this was around 2012, early 2013. So I would email her once a month, and she had an office in New York, and we would always meet and talk. And I think she was always kind of testing me. Is this the right guy? And, she never asked me to define who Gartner is and who's Gartner's competitors and Forrester and IDC. I think she was just trying to make sure I was someone who could fit this role. And long story short, even though it's a bit of an irony as I keep going here, I wake up in July of 2013 to an email from her saying, here's the YouTube link. This is why it took so long. And there they are ringing the bell at the stock exchange.
Oh,
so
wow.
You had taken the company public. And now I said, all right, this has got to be the time. Now, remember, a couple months ago, I landed this big account. We're cranking 8, pilots, and everybody's happy. And I said to Jeff, who I worked with, I said, what do you think? He goes, you're taking that job if you get it. So, I did one more sort of more formal interview. I had to pitch a piece of their business, so she knew that I knew what I was talking about. And she goes to Moscow, because at that point the company, had a lot of delivery out of Russia, and they get approval. She says, all right, sounds like he knows what he's doing. Bring him on. So August, September comes around. So I did a year at the project management company, and then I started, and I got there, and the office was right across from Penn Station, and I said, man, this is where I'm at. So I had to very quickly, without AI, get up to date on who is Luxoft competing with. What do they mean when they say enterprise custom software development? What does nearshore mean, right? Like, I had to really fake it for a while until I got going. And then, everything fell into place. And so when I look back and I say, I couldn't figure out that what I wanted to do until I started to talk to people about what they were looking for in people to work for them, right? Because a lot of times you're whiteboarding by yourself. Yeah, you could talk to the career counselor, but at the end of the day, until you start to talk to people about different jobs and roles, that's how you say, oh, that sounds interesting. That's something I could do. And so if, we weren't at that event and she wasn't at the bar at that time, and I was getting bored, and we started to just network with everybody, and I had enough tenacity to email her once a month, and Jeff tells me, take the job. This sounds like a great company. It just went public, because again, he's telling me from a sell side, they just went public. You got to go there. That's a great time in the company, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then 6 months in, she said, you want to take over PR? And I said, yeah, I could do that. Never having written a press release before. At least there were ones published before that I could copy the model.
Put me in, coach.
And then, long story short, I had that company, Luxoft, was the American dream. I still get I still get very, emotional about talking about my experience there, because you walk in having very little experience with an organization that was growing 20% year over year, and to end up in the head of marketing role 6 years later, I mean, that was such an experience. And then we got acquired by DXC, large IT
Yeah.
provider. And I'll never forget when the boss called me at that point and said, "Hey, I need you in Virginia on Saturday." I said, "It's time." And so that happened. And, then I had a chance to get a big tier 1 logo on my resume. I took a job within DXC because you can't have 2 heads of marketing, right? So I took
Sure.
the advisor relations role, and which is a very niche function, but we're a small group of people. And then did that for 2 years. We had a little bit of changeover, new CEO. COVID was basically that whole thing. And
Yeah.
then Hitachi came calling through one of the consultancies that a lot of the IT providers work with. And I interviewed, and it was probably 30 days of summertime where I said, this sounds like a really interesting opportunity. But to your first question about Hitachi, I had no idea that they were doing what they were doing, and I remember when I interviewed, one of the interviews said to me, "It's going to take you a while to get your head around this, level of innovation," and couldn't ask for anything more. So that's how it went.
Wow, what a ride. It's crazy how things work. You wouldn't have, it sounds like a movie, just what are the odds that you would be, sitting next to that lady at the bar and have that conversation with her, and then kudos to your tenacity for staying on her and keeping up with those relationships. People aren't great at that. She probably
Yeah.
was thinking like, this is the guy I want to be, building relationships with the analyst. Like, he's good, he stays on it, he's well spoken, whatever was going through her mind at that point. I guess, you said you've been on this job for a few years now. What's one thing you know now that you wish you had known on day one?
It's a good question. I, I, well, so I would answer it in 2 ways. I read an article once, probably midway through the 13 years that I've been doing this, and it was from some managing director at Goldman Sachs. I don't remember her name, but it was talking about jobs, right? And I think this likely was in an area, a little bit when the economy was on the uptick, people were looking for jobs and they were hiring out there. And the advice she gave was drill down and become an expert in something very deep.
Mm.
And so I think I took that advice and I said, that means at my role when I read that, I was running external relations, not marketing at Luxoft, but analyst, advisor, PR, and to some extent there was some thought leadership involved. But so I said, all right, based on this, I got to be the best AR advisor, external relations guy there is out there. And even though I sat in marketing at that point when I had sort of expanded out of investor relations, I wasn't really paying attention as much as I should have.
Hmm.
And the article, I think, said you got to have depth in order to get hired so you can talk about everything 0 to 100. And then you start to wonder, well, doesn't that isolate you a little bit? Doesn't that not give you the ability to move around laterally within the larger sort of unit that you're in? And I'm still I still debate myself on that
Yeah.
article and the impact that it had on me, right? Uh, so that's one, which is, yes, depth is important, and you need to know how to master 1 to 2 things within the larger unit that you're working in, whether it's marketing or sales or otherwise. And so I feel like if I would have been much more open to understanding marketing, that would have helped me, in phase 2 of where I am now. And so my I guess my thesis here is, you want to be able to do the ocean, but you have to be able to swim deep and come back up faster than you think you do.
Yeah.
And so that's the first part in terms of career depth versus career broadness, right? Now, at the same token, Richard, I'm sure you agree with me. You don't want to be somebody that does everything 1,000 times, right? You need to have something that brings you home. Now, the second point would be, was I prepared enough for AI? And we had done, there's a panel, we do a couple things with a law firm called Loeb and Loeb and a consultancy called Alvarez and Marsal. And every now and then we have a guest speaker from one of the industry analysts, HFS Research, which has been a big advocate of AI. They're always sort of forward thinking in terms of AI and different trends over the last 10 years or so. And we had an event 2.5 years ago about ChatGPT. And I remember walking in saying, even though I'm moderating, I'm going to learn as much as I know about this thing that I'm in charge of orchestrating for 75 people in the room that are saying, I need to know about ChatGPT. And so I always ask this on interviews now, where are you with AI? And I feel like before AI came out, there was never a question that was always consistent about a technological trend. We may have asked about HubSpot, Marketo, LinkedIn advertising, which webinar platform do you like, BrightTalk or whatever. But this AI thing now is a layer for all of this stuff. And, part of me looks back and I say, I should have been paying attention more, 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago on this stuff, because I think it helps you formulate your strategy moving forward. So those are two things that I look back on, that what can I have done differently that would have been helpful now or in the future around?
Yeah, no, that's good insight. And you mentioned the two, most popular letters over the past, 5 years, AI. I guess, how is that changing the way, I know it's affecting your industry big time. How are you guys responding to AI, and how do you see that shaping your industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
So I'm a big believer in what our Chief Technology Officer, Prem Kumar, said when he was on stage. And the question that he got is the question we all see and we all panic about, which is the impact on the workforce.
Yeah.
And I know you've seen it too. There's been theories in both directions about it's not going to impact anybody. It's going to impact everybody.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if everybody's guilty of something, nobody's guilty of anything type of argument, right? And so he said on this panel an answer that I will take with me to the AI grave, which is, it's not about cutting the workforce. It's about restructuring the way in which people work. And that to me is wisdom that should be the guiding principles of how AI is adopted everywhere. Because there are times where I've been involved in some workshops we've done and for clients, and you can see the level of AI proficiency is very, very low. And there was one event we were at where there was a very somebody talking about, here's what AI is going to be in iRobot times, that type of. And I get up there and I start by saying, because there's a baby boomer generation, they're still working, right? And I started it by saying, if you think all of that is going to happen at the speed that it is, then we have to remember which remote to use when to turn on the TV versus turn on the cable box, because I know that's still a problem for some of us in this room. When you think about it at a basic level, right? People still don't know how to use the iPhones to full capacity. They still don't know how to leverage their and their technology that's used on a day-to-day basis to the full capacity. They still don't know how to change from on demand to your cable provider, leveraging one remote. So the question is, you have to learn AI. It has to be a part of your portfolio, because I think The Economist wrote that article. They were the first ones that came out and said, look, it's not about competing with each other. It's going to be about the person that knows AI is going to be competing against the person that doesn't know AI. And I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
But there has to, you and I are involved in, we're on social media all the time. AI is a topic of technology all the time. it sometimes gets, we get filled with it. So we don't have a chance to step back and say, hey, did you update your software on your iPhone tonight? We don't have a chance to see what the reality is on the ground with the role of AI now. And I think predominantly in a B2C setting, it's very much generative AI. They're using it to implement their, help their Googling and research and what's the best country to go to if I want 75-degree days and has 3 Marriott hotels and an Irish bar and the cheapest to get to.
Yeah.
That is being used for. So, there's a reality sense that I think this AI story has to get in. But Hitachi itself, has been doing AI now for 20 plus years. It's nothing new to us in any shape or form, especially the physical AI, right? Which is again the operational technology and the IT technology. So when you live it and see it every day, you sort of become clicked into it, and it's part of everything. But not everyone's life is like that, and we have to start thinking in those terms.
No, that's a great answer. That is something that, I'm lucky enough to have seen a couple of these waves. Like I remember when I first started my career, the internet was going to be a big deal, and it was, right. But it didn't, nobody just flipped the light switch and it was the internet was upon us, right? I remember there were people saying, "Nah, this is a trend. This is going to go away in a few years," right? And then when the iPhone came out, like that was a big one, right? Nobody was prepared for the way that would change the way people interact with the internet, and they kind of built on each other. And so I feel like AI is that next wave, and it's going to have a ramp up period, just like all those other ones are. And I'm sure there'll be a bubble, just like all happened with all the other ones.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I was only in 9th grade in 2000, so I was there at a different. My experience was very different than a lot of other people's experiences that are were even 5 to 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
And that and this is something else that I often talk to the team about. We have a fairly younger team, so we're used to a lot of the new things. But remember, I'm 39. Somebody could be applying for a job at 20, 21. 18 years difference in their understanding of technology. So when I was, and I know, I guess I'm considered a millennial, right? Born in the mid 80s or whatever, but there was a piece that was saying a faction of the millennials are called genials with an X. I think about my timeline in technology usage. I didn't have a cell phone until 7th grade. Now that cell phone was obvious. It was a Nokia, most likely, right? Or those singular flip phones that we all had. And then you had the, you had Windows 95, Windows 98, and very limited email action and so on. You had instant messenger. So that was a little bit of a dependency to chat with people and do all that chat room stuff. But it didn't create a new way of engaging with people. It was sort of an add-on, right?
Right.
And even texting at that point, you had to pay. If you remember, you had to pay to send text messages.
Oh yeah. And pressing the button 3 times to get to the Z or whatever.
Right. So, and sometimes it was actually an inconvenience. In other words, I remember when Nextel came out, I was a senior in high school, and with the two-way walkie-talkie.
Oh man.
We all jumped on that because we loved having the instant communication. Yeah, it was great. And then I get to college, 2004, 2005, Facebook gets launched. And it was only at that point restricted to college, college email addresses. And then I was a point where I didn't have Facebook for a long time because it was just, there's no value in this. I'm not getting anything out of it. So by the time I entered the workforce, maybe with an iPhone 3GS, emails had gotten more important because of that. And you were able to get information a lot faster. Things like MapQuest, printing out directions, turned into GPS now on the phone. But think about how long that period is. So in 7th grade, what's that, 1997 for me, 98, through to 2007, that's a 10-year period where we went from, like you said, getting to the 3rd letter to having a basic Facebook account. Now imagine you're in 7th grade now, And in 10 years, what that technology is going to be different, how that's going to be so much faster and stronger and more integrated, and so on and so forth. So I think we got pretty lucky, these mid-'80s Genials, that the technology was an add-on. It wasn't a deciding factor in what you did and how you operated in the world.
Yeah.
But now it's a complete part of it. Like if you don't ask the question about AI on the interview, they're going to say, "Hey, how come you didn't ask me about AI? I need to make sure that my boss knows what he's doing with AI."
Yeah. And
The speed factor got really, 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 really gentrified that way.
sure. And they had asked AI to prepare for that question.
I
I'm sure. Uh,
So I had my resume, Times New Roman, font size 12. It's been like that forever, right? It's all bulleted. You always start with a verb. You
yeah.
don't have executive summaries and what they're calling all the AI tags now, all these words that don't mean anything. So I said, let me have ChatGPT give me an assessment on my CV. Am I still in shape? It said, Patrick, great CV if you were applying for a job in 2019. And
I love it.
so I said, what do I need to do to get to 2026? And it gave me a bunch of suggestions in terms of, how to shorten it and all these different things, right? Tag it, make sure, because there's all this technology scanning it and so on. But I must say, when I get resumes from our recruiting team, which does a great job here of, sort of vetting, the really good candidates, I look at them. I'm not spending tons of time, but I want to see a chronology of where these individuals have been. I could care less about the words that they put on there in the executive summaries and cover letters. That's not
Yeah.
important anymore. It's
Yeah.
all about your LinkedIn gives me a sense of your presentability to the market, and then what your CV says in terms of your job history. But all that other stuff, it doesn't matter in the evaluation. It matters, I guess, sometimes to get through the
Yeah.
gate, right? But there's still that human piece that you need to stay connected to.
Yeah, I hate to break it to everybody. I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of resumes in my career, and I've probably never read one cover letter.
I'm with you.
Who
The
has
other
time for that?
Wait a minute, Richard. Have you ever written your own cover letter?
Oh yeah, I told my son, he was looking for jobs, and I was like, "You got to write your cover letter. You got to have a cover letter that no one's going to read."
Yeah,
A
that's
good
funny.
job that's a really good job for AI.
It is. Yep.
Um,
And that brings you to what the question is, all right, AI, everybody's using it, but the prompt aspect of it is critical now. And I think that's becoming the next phase of your AI competency, which is, okay, I know how to use the tool. I know how to ask it questions. I know when to integrate it, what not to put on there, what to put on there. But now you have to be able to prompt it the right way to make sure that your outcome is correct. I mean, an easy example is when this podcast is done and recorded, I would love to do a LinkedIn post. Now, if I say to ChatGPT, write a LinkedIn post for this podcast, and I don't give it any context as to who Richard is, his impact, the company that interviewed me, right, what the history of this entire series has been, the answer could be very generic and people are not going to fly by it. So you got to make sure that you're prompting this stuff correctly. And that's another level of thinking that I still see a lot of deficiency in. People don't know how to contextualize this stuff. And that's incredibly important for marketing. If you're going to run a campaign, you have to make sure that you're telling it all aspects of stakeholders, industries, spending habits, budgets, and you have to educate AI too. You have to make it work for you.
Oh,
So
100%, 100%. I mean, I always say marketing is simple, but it's not easy. It's who are we talking to? What keeps them up at night? How do we solve that problem better than anyone else in the world? And once you know that, you can figure out, okay, well, where are they at, and let's start talking to them. But yeah, you got to tell AI those things, or else it's not going to give you a very good answer. It's going to be very
100%.
superficial. I just finished a book called The AI-Driven Leader. Have you read this? Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh man, I'll send you a link after this. It was really good, but he has this formula for writing prompts that I've tried it out and I love it. It's like it's called the CRIT method, and so
like
you provide the C stands for context, So tell it everything you need to know. Tell them about you. Tell them about the problem you're trying to solve. All these other things. And then the R is responsibility or role. So you tell it like you are a financial analyst for, you know, Bear Stearns, like whatever, you know, you go through the whole thing and you tell and you give it a role. You have this much experience. You're on the board of this company, whatever. Really rich. The richer, the better. And then you tell it to interview you. That's what the I is for. And tell it, you know, ask me one question at a time that you would need to know to help me solve this problem. And it does. And it comes to these great questions. And then after that, it's the T. And then the T is like transaction or whatever. So it's like, tell it to, you know, to do a task. Task is what it is. And so anyway, I found it to be so useful. It's a nice little prompt methodology. So give it a shot. I ruined the book. So I'm sorry, Jeff, or whoever, I forgot what the guy's name was that wrote it. But you know, people don't need to buy it anymore.
It's okay. I can probably go on ChatGPT and ask for Cliff Notes anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Well, you know, I love in your career that early in your career you're doing sales, because I think sales is one of those jobs that makes you better, make a way better marketer. I think it makes you better at everything. You know, makes you a better analyst. Just learning to deal with people, learning to get the door slammed in your face, all those things. It's such a useful skill to have. And I know you're really passionate about sales and marketing integration. That probably is what informed that.
Yeah.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career for when it comes to sales and marketing?
It's a great question. So I'm very fortunate here that marketing rolls into our president, who's also our chief business officer, Santosh, and he's got, you know, almost 3 decades of selling experience behind him. And so when you're able to embed a sales philosophy into your market, into your go-to-market, then it's not just about this creative piece. So oftentimes when I look around and I see job ads for marketing leaders, there's always a request, not always, there's often a request to share your own website, right? To let them know that you are a creative person, or to share your sort of portfolio if you've done content work or thought leadership. Sure. And I can understand why you want to see some credentials. However, at the end of the day, the role of marketing is to support the business development and the growth of the organization. And that's not about how creative you were when you built the portfolio, or how distinguished you were about when you wrote a white paper, or how good your case study structure was. It's about how is this attitude of sales and your understanding of the principles of sales embedded into everything you do from a marketing perspective. So having Santosh as really our guide in terms of what's important and how to think about, hey, that's a great campaign. If I were to buy that, I would think about this, this, and this. So all that stuff has been very helpful. And, you know, you have to have a good relationship with that part of the business, or else you'll be putting very creative stuff out there that no one's looking at because the messaging's not aligned, right?
Yeah.
So to me, my recommendation is for anybody looking to hire someone in marketing, they should always be asking, what's been your engagement with sales? How have you worked with service delivery? What's your internal stakeholder Rolodex look like? Less about, do you know how to design a LinkedIn tile better than company X? That stuff is important. I'm not saying it's not, because that helps you get differentiated, but it's all about the message anyway. So, you know, I learned that early, and I'm very, you know, fortunate to be in a situation where, you know, sales has always been a good ally of all we do for go-to-market.
Oh, amen, brother. I'm right there with you. I think so many times marketing people think about B2C and or B2C marketers, but in the B2B world, you know, always, you know, I have you mentioned football coaching. I'm from Texas, so it's in our religion that you have to love football. And so here's forgive the football analogy for those of you who are not football people, but I always feel like, you know, marketing and B2B is, I think it can it can get the salespeople right to the goal line, and then the salesperson just needs to punch it in.
Yep.
Or sometimes sales and marketing are working, hand in hand all the way from our own end zone, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and a long, tedious sales cycle, and then finally you punch it in. But it's got to be that dance when it comes to B2B, and it's amazing to me how many people haven't caught on to that. And but I see it's a big trend now to change. But I almost feel guilty of it. When I was working for a big international, oil and gas service company, and I had a ad agency background. I was a graphic designer. I love making stuff look cool. Love winning awards. All these things. And some we do these really cool brochures and things like that. And I would go visit the sales office, and they're sitting in a broom closet. I'm like, guys, what's going on? Why are you using our thing? And they're like, oh yeah, well, the messaging wasn't quite right or whatever. And that's what woke me up to this. I was like, you know what? We've got to align with the sales team to get in there, because at the end of the day, that's the only time the cash register rings, is if a sales guy closes it.
100%. And to leverage your football metaphor, the third part of using the field is you're not always going to be on offense, right? There are times where you're going to be on defense because a competitor is being aggressive on a particular offering, or a client's looking for a discount, or something's going to be competitive, or things are becoming commoditized, and you got to be able to respond to that. And the only way to do that is having 11 people all marching in the same direction, trying to get an interception, a fumble, turnover on downs, whatever it might be. And that's, I think, where the real resolve is tested between the relationship in sales and marketing.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. And I got to add that to my metaphor for sure, because sometimes you go out there and you get punched in the mouth, right? And you go, how are we going to respond to this? Because, I think that's the thing that makes marketing fun, in my opinion, is it's so dynamic. If you tell me you've got marketing cracked, solved, and you've got it all figured out, I'm gonna call BS on it pretty fast, because you might have it figured out yesterday, but today's a new day.
Yeah, and having played and coached, I look at people like Nick Saban, in terms of his philosophy on how to orchestrate a good team. A lot of that is very similar to what you would have to do in marketing or sales or any other organization. So I don't look only at marketeers to figure out how to try and be the best people manager and team organizer, because sometimes you need to get out of your space to get philosophies from other individuals that are different, right? That are not, I don't want to say jaded, but they're not built in through having done marketing for 20, 30 years. There's other experiences that matter.
Sure. Yeah. We're lucky to have worked with a lot of people across different industries, but that's always the first thing we want to know is like, do you have experience in our industry? I'm like, yeah, but we have experience in other industries, because you guys suck at marketing in your industry.
Yep.
All right. Well, what tactics, or what are you guys doing from a sales and marketing perspective today that you find that really is working well for you? Or what have you tried that you go, wow, that didn't work out at all. I'm glad we're going to pass on that next time.
Well, I can't give you any of the weakness secrets, but what I can tell you is, life cycle is important and integration is important. So every campaign that you launch or deliverable that you throw to the market, we want to always make sure there's a life cycle behind it. And there is some of the stuff is short term, right? You always have your sort of pops of interest news that you want to get out there. But, the rationale for publishing something needs to tie itself back into something you're going to publish a month later, right? So you need to have this sort of consistent thinking around every campaign you do, every channel you touch should roughly have the same storyline in terms of what's being produced later. And not everything is, landing on the moon and then not going to the next planet, right? So we want to make sure that everything we do has a life cycle and a mid to long term focus on it. So that's important.
Yeah. Are there what do you see as emerging trends? We talked a lot about AI, and I know you have a real opinion about over reliance on AI. But what do you see? What are and it could be AI or any other emerging trends that you're seeing on the horizon?
That's a good question. That is definitely a good question, and it's hard to sort of detract AI because it's sort of touching everything now. I mean, there is the agentic part of AI now, where you're building agents to do certain things, and we're exploring, how to leverage that. I'm sure everybody is at this point, right?
Sure.
It's not just about the generative AI aspect of it. It's the agent piece. Certainly, well, I think social media is great and I love it. I'm very active on LinkedIn. But the noise is there and you have to be able to get through the noise somehow.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to the focus of the targeting and the focus of the message now. You have to be able to figure out how to get access to stakeholders that are critical to your business goals. And that's not as easy as it once used to be. And the other thing I would say on trade shows, you remember, again, back in the day, everyone wanted to do field work because you went to these trade shows and you picked up all leads. I'm not saying that doesn't happen now,
Sure.
but you could see that the ROI on events is changing to get educated and to network and to meet with partners where it would take, we had dinner with, one of our, key stakeholders at Verizon when I was in London with Santosh. And, he said, hey, I'm going down to Mobile World Congress and, it gives me the chance to meet with 20 of my partners that would have taken 8 months to do, but we're all in the same spot, right? So the networking component, not so much business development, lead gen, but relationship management at events has also taken off. So I think the field marketing approach from a trade show perspective is definitely changing. It's also very big on announcements now, like NVIDIA, AWS, Microsoft, Google, and so on and so forth, SAP, Oracle. And what I see happening is these very specific client invite dinners where, for example, we did one, we had a celebrity chef come in from our partner team managed this. And it was awesome. We had enterprises there. Everybody loved it, and you say, all right, I was at AWS, but it gave me the chance to get off the premises and meet with one particular vendor in a very closed setting with a very specialized agenda and a really cool experience. And you can't buy that in field. You have to create that for your field to be able to take a part in. So I would say those would be the two things, right? The changing of the field and the breaking through the noise on the digital space. Whether an agent does it or not, to be determined.
Yeah, no, those steak dinners and things like that associated with events where you can create a memory, an event is so important. I think it's if you think about it, the one good thing that about a person at a trade show is that they're traveling.
Yeah,
they probably don't have plans for dinner. They don't have to be home to visit their kids. Any of that stuff. It's great. They're happy to go and join you for an evening out and have a little scotch or bourbon and eat a steak, right? Or have a sushi chef. One last question for you. What advice would you give someone just starting out their career in marketing?
So we'll go back to the point, Richard, that we discussed before about breadth and depth.
Yeah.
Find balance, especially early, because you're going to be able to then pivot through different types of opportunities. I would also say be broad in your applications. Don't be only focused on those 3 jobs that you want, because when you get hooked into an area similar to how it worked for me, things will change and you'll start to like and see what you do like and what you don't like. Thirdly, get as active as you can building your own brand, meaning get to these networking events. I don't mean buying tickets to trade shows and so on, but there's always local networking events happening in all the major cities that people, are engaged in IT. Start to get there. Make sure your LinkedIn profile looks good, looks solid. And even, limited work experience. It's okay. Everybody starts somewhere. Make sure that when you're going after certain roles that your resume is up to speed from a quote AI perspective, right? All these little things, I think, put together a strong portfolio to get somewhere. And don't forget, leverage the experience of your family too. You may have a second cousin who's working at a company here, right? Or, a friend that you haven't seen. Don't be afraid to talk to them and say, hey, what's going on at your company? Anything going on that I could look into, any advice you have, go out, get coffee, and do all this not only to learn about the industry, but something you said before is getting face to face and learning how to have eye contact and shaking hands and knowing when to sit up when somebody comes to the table and how to order a coffee and to take your earbuds out when somebody's there. All these little things, make you much more of a presentable candidate.
Oh man. Well, thanks for that. That is a great advice. And I'm going to tell my son that stuff. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you being on the show today. And, I know you got a busy schedule ahead of you, so thanks for being on, and have a great day.
Thank you for everything, and thanks to the whole team. This has been great, Richard. I really appreciate it.
All right. Hey, if you happen to see Billy Joel out in Long Island, tell him I said hi.
Will do. Will do.
All right, Patrick. Take care.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, sharing, or spreading the news about us on your favorite channel. Thank you for tuning into Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. Until next time, stay above the clouds.